All right, we're up for launch 3 of 3 in today's episode of AWS What's Next. Here to tell us a little bit more about solutions constructs is Ryan Hayes, solutions builder here at AWS. Ryan, thanks for joining us.
Yep. Thanks, Nick. Thanks, Robert, for having us today. Really appreciate the time, and looking forward to telling people about what we just came out with here.
Awesome. Well, there's lots of solutions at AWS. We're big on solutions, right? We've got solutions architecture, we've got solutions architects that help people solve that. We're launching solutions constructs today, and when I think of the word constructs, it rings a bell with CDK constructs, right? So am I putting the pieces together the right way? What are solutions constructs?
Yeah. So Solutions Constructs is an open source library of well architected patterns that extends the AWS Cloud Development Kit, or CDK, like you mentioned. And for folks who aren't too familiar with that, thinking about it in the infrastructure rainforest, if you will, on the ground level, we have the cloud formation that we all know and love in JSON and YAML formats. And then kind of moving up, we have the CDK, which kind of provides a level of abstraction above that, lets you programmatically define parts of your infrastructure using programming languages that you're familiar with. And then on top of that is where AWS solutions constructs come in. It's gonna, these are reusable higher level groupings of CDK constructs. And we also, ship them pre-baked with AWS best practice defaults. And this is really so that developers can focus on building their applications. And meanwhile, we'll take care of making sure that it's up to par with the architecture and security standards, or, best practices on the foundational level. Um, yeah.
Now I understand that one of the principles behind the CDK was that we wanted to meet developers where they are. So maybe they're comfortable in a particular IDE, they like using a particular language, or simply that they prefer the imperative style of infrastructure as code versus the declarative style that you have with YAML or JSON. Um, you know, Given that, maybe can you give us a little bit of background? What was the light bulb moment when you went, yes, this is what the customer needs here is solutions construct. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, going back to that whole kind of comparison between the three kind of infrastructure as code options that we now have, AWS, right? So, like, when you're writing out an application, or the infrastructure for an application, and let's say you're doing CloudFormation, that can get kind of long. Obviously, we have some ways to mitigate, readability and, kind of the size of those stacks. But when you're dealing with large production size or enterprise grade applications, you could be dealing with, thousands of lines of YAML or JSON, stuff like that. And so the aha moment for me personally was, going through spinning up a project, even for the demo that I just put together that we'll be looking at in a little bit, is when you go through and you have your 100 or so lines of TypeScript code, and you hit the CDK synth command and it spits out thousands of lines of CloudFormation. You really start to see the value there, both in terms of the amount of technical overhead that you're working with, and kind of keeping things fresh on the team, in terms of like the code that you're working with. But just, everything's so much cleaner. It's a great, thing to work with, and it's awesome to have everything kind of in the same IDE.
But so I just kind of dived a little deeper into that. You mentioned that you can write something like 100 lines of TypeScript that'll generate thousands of lines of CloudFormation. Does that then imply that you're operating at a consistent level of abstraction, or is the intention that you can kind of switch down and operate at either level whenever you choose?
Yeah, that's a great point. So the one thing that we want to emphasize is, you can use AWS solutions constructs and AWS CDK constructs, seamlessly in the same project. So when we're speaking in terms of like how much code are you saving using AWS solutions constructs, it's really a kind of a harmony between that and the CDK. So what we really want to message out is, you're by grouping together these CDK constructs that you could be using to, kind of whittle down this CloudFormation template that you might have, that's helping you further reduce the code that you're working with, because instead of defining out each of those constructs, that you might have to do multiple times depending on what your team's working on, you can have one go-to pattern that will envelop those and save you a little bit more coding and time on top of the great advantages that the CDK already offers.
So when I think about who's going to be most excited about this, I'm thinking if I'm trying to rapidly prototype something, again, I have this idea of a few different pieces of AWS infrastructure that I want to string together. I don't want to go and write thousands of line of CloudFormation. If I could just sort of imperatively define that using the CDK, that may be a bit quicker. Also, let's say maybe I have this huge application I'm trying to migrate, right? Like maybe if I'm starting from scratch, it will be easier to define all of that infrastructure that I already know very well using something like these solution constructs. And in an effort to tie them together, using solutions constructs essentially is going to give me a lot of peace of mind that I'm abiding by best practices for those various CDK constructs, as opposed to me sort of stringing them all together myself. Is that sort of the right wavelength here?
Yeah, so exactly. So when I say we wrap up the CDK constructs and everything, we also include some prescriptive defaults, so that the user doesn't have to worry too much, depending on the use case, of course, with some of the things like security, right out of the gate. They can really get started with building their application, and move quickly in that respect and get to a prototype. We try to include enough prescriptive defaults to the point where it's going to kind of give that foundation, but also so that it's not overwhelming. And the other thing that we do is we allow the user to override those defaults as well. If something's just not working out, they can go in and obviously put in defaults or settings rather that work best for their business case. So it's a little bit of a balancing act, I think, but that's really what we're shooting for there, is a little bit of harmony between getting the developer up and running, being able to do rapid prototypes, demos, even anything up to just an actual production application, getting them to that point quicker and making them or enabling them to deliver faster.
Yeah, so in terms of level of abstraction, you mentioned that this is one level higher essentially than the CDK because it produces CDK code in the end, essentially. But let's make this a little more tangible, right? Like, what does the developer experience look like to use this then? We talked about it being directly in where you would write CDK code traditionally, but is this available for all languages? Does it have parity with the languages that the CDK supports? What does it look like as a developer? If I wanted to string together service A and service B, how would I get started doing that?
Yeah, that's a great question, Nick. And one of the things that we'll touch on exactly that in the demo too, but on the high level, you can expect the same developer experience as you would with the CDK. We support TypeScript, Python, Java, C# is coming. That's a language that the CDK currently supports, so we're working towards that as well. But really, if you want to spin up a project, it's pretty much as simple as you can do a CDK init, for instance, that'll spit out an entire baseline project for you to start working with. But you can really just start with a project folder, install and import the patterns that you'd like to use from your favorite package manager like npm, PyPy, Maven, and then just declare it and configure any properties just as you would with any kind of normal application. It's for a lot of use cases we find that can just be one TypeScript file, and so it makes everything nice and contained. And then really from that point, once your project's in a good state, you can either deploy it out directly to your AWS account, and either start using it directly or do some integration testing with it, or you can synthesize it into a CloudFormation template with source code package on the side if that's applicable, if you want to distribute it out to a team or for customers to use. So,
well, now that you put it that way, I'm very excited to see. I understand we have a demo, but before we dive into that, I noticed a couple of really good questions coming across in LinkedIn chat. Let me just replay those for you, if that's all right.
Sure.
So one of these questions is to do with how we evolve the solution construct, the library of solution constructs. So is there a way for the user community to feed enhancement requests back and to share their experiences? I think what this is also getting at is, like, let's say a customer has had a particular problem with that has resulted in a reusable solution of some sort. Can they commit that or propose that?
Yeah, so we launched this past Monday. We currently have our all of our code up on GitHub for everyone to see. The real intention here is we want to treat it like a real open source project. So in terms of I guess community contributions is the best way to put it. We encourage everyone to work with a project as they would a normal open source project. So if there's an issue, a bug, or something like that, they can handle that through issues on GitHub. And then if they have a pattern or even just a bug fix or something kind of in between those two lines, we could handle it with the pull requests. So that's kind of what we envision. We invite everyone to kind of take the library apart and help us make it better together. And yeah, we invite kind of everyone to contribute to that evolving process and really make it something that helps a lot of developers out.
Awesome. And Christopher Dunn from AO.com asks, are solutions constructs like packages for the CDK?
Yeah, you could kind of think of it that way. I mean, so you're at the end of the day, when you're working with them, right, you're going to do an npm install. Let's say you need a Lambda to S3 kind of interaction. You'll do npm install, the namespace, and then AWS Lambda to S3, and then you just bring it into your TypeScript file if that's what you're working with. And it's very just declarative, package-like kind of user interface there.
Awesome. Well, I think that's all the questions for now. Should we dive into the demo?
Sounds good to me. Let me go ahead and share my screen over here. Okay. So today what we'll be talking about, and as Nick touched on a little bit earlier, we'll be kind of walking through what it's like to build a solution using AWS solutions constructs. And the important thing to note here is we'll also be sprinkling in a little bit of CDK as well. So we'll get kind of the best of both worlds there in terms of how this all kind of comes together for the developer. And so the example that we'll be using today is serverless image handler architecture. And this is an existing solution that our team has available on aws.amazon.com/solutions. Basically what it does is it's in the form of a CloudFormation template, and it gives you a image handler API that you can hook up to a web or mobile application that will deliver back optimized images for the device that the customer is using. So an example would be if you have, 4,000 by 4,000 pixel original image, you don't want to be sending that to somebody's, iPhone. It's too big. You're not going to get a good benefit out of it. So the idea here is you keep those original images in the S3 bucket that the solution provisions for you, and then the web or mobile application will make requests based on kind of the viewport sizing or application sizing that it detects, and the Lambda function will deliver back an optimized image through that API and through the CloudFront distro. Interesting thing here too, to save the customer a little bit more money, is that the CloudFront distribution acts as a caching layer. So you only have to make that request once. And not that, handling stuff through Lambda is particularly expensive on a 1 or 2 time run per day. But, over the course of, a lot of requests and, enterprise scale application, it could get a little expensive. So it's just one little extra thing that we do to save the customer money there with the existing implementation that we have. But we'll be using this for today. It's a 4-service architecture, as you can see. We've got that CloudFront, API gateway, Lambda, and S3 that we'll be provisioning. And so, like I said, this is the existing implementation. When we're thinking about, how to build this in terms of patterns, what's the best first step? And so the easiest way to go about this is, let's look at the solutions constructs library and try to take this apart. And so right now we have about 23 or so, 25 patterns that we can pick from. We're kind of going to put a puzzle together from this. So we'll pick the patterns that we can kind of build this same architecture with using the least amount of work. And so that just so happens to be the CloudFront to API to Lambda pattern that we have, and the Lambda to S3 pattern that's in the library. And depending on the text size here, you might ask, why can't you use the AWS CloudFront to API gateway pattern itself and do some other combination? Really, the goal that we're trying to focus on here is just doing the least amount of code necessary to get us to a viable kind of POC or product here. So these two patterns are going to get us there.
Yeah, and to make that, you know, very direct, like traditionally, if you were to try to represent this application directly through the CDK, you would have to, you know, tie each of those 4 individual pieces of infrastructure together. So you're talking about, let's say, 4 pieces of four arbitrary units of code, right? Whereas now we have, you know, these bigger Lego or bricks or puzzle pieces or whatever you want to call them, and you only have to tie 2 of them together, and you have the understanding that all of those interconnected entities within the start and end of that block are done in a well architected manner.
Yeah, that's a great point, Nick. You took the words right out of my mouth with that. It's all about, you know, minimizing the amount of CDK constructs that you're putting together, and, you know, just saving even more resources in terms of fleshing out your solution. So yeah, great point there. But working through the demo, right? So we're gonna take it, you know, end to end here. We're gonna get set up with our project environment. So if we were to open a command line, you know, right now, first thing we would do if we don't already have this done is do a quick npm global install of the AWS CDK, because that's what we'll need to do kind of deployment work, and we'll need to be running the CDK to get the benefits of solutions constructs. So if you already have that installed, that's great. We will skip to the next step, and that's to just on the low level create our project folder. So we'll add a folder to our desktop or wherever we're running this, and then we'll jump into it using the cd command. And then finally, what we're going to do is we're going to run the CDK init command. And that, I touched on it just a little bit earlier, but what that does is it deploys a kind of default or baseline project structure into the location that you just specified in a given language. So for this case, we'll be using TypeScript, and that will give you, you know, your default stack. It'll even give you a kind of empty unit test case to get started with unit testing and integration testing. So really good resource to use when you're doing a clean sheet design for your solution. So like I said, this is the expected outcome for that. You can see on the left-hand side, it'll give you some output in terms of useful commands that you can work with while building your project. Everything from building to deployment is listed out there for you. And then on the right-hand side, you see that default project structure.
Sorry for interrupting. I have a so my chroma key green filter is messing up with your green text on the content. So you mentioned that these are some of the useful commands you can run. I'll just read them off. So there's npm run build, npm run watch, run test, and then cdk deploy, cdk diff, and cdk synth.
Oh.
Yeah.
There's a lot of green in this. Beware. No,
that's on my side. It's all good.
Worries. Yeah, that's hilarious. Cool. Yeah, so we're all teed up to start building this. Let's jump right in. So like we mentioned from the chat, right, we're going to need to install a couple of packages. So first things first, we're going to bring in a few AWS CDK packages for API Gateway and Lambda. And basically the reason why we're doing this is because we'll need to configure a couple of things with those 2 resources beyond the scope of what the patterns offer. If you're just using default configuration, and if your architecture allows it, you don't need to do this, but this is for this given use case. And then next up, we'll bring in those AWS solutions constructs packages that we showed in the previous slide. So we have our CloudFront API Gateway to Lambda as the first, and then our Lambda to S3 pattern coming in second. And that takes us through the install. So getting started with the build, you know, referencing back that project structure that we just took a look at, in the lib folder, we see a you know, solution name -stack.ts file. This is where the majority of our solution logic is going to sit. And when we talked about like that one TypeScript file that we use for everything, this is really going to be it. So we'll go ahead and flesh this out, starting with the imports and globals. We'll put those to work. Then we'll define some parameters for our solution, and then we'll actually move forward with putting in the business logic for it. All right, so in kind of a block coding example here, we can see all of the work that we need to do, and it's still only 53 lines to get us, you know, from point A to point B. So we'll start with the imports for this solution. We'll bring in those CDK packages that we just installed, and then next up we'll call those AWS solutions construct patterns that we also installed in the previous step. Moving down into the class, we're going to just define some global variables to keep track of resources, because we'll need to call back like bucket names and things like that. So it's good to keep track of those. And then next step we have is we're going to start to flesh out our parameters. And so anyone who's familiar with, CloudFormation at the low level, and then even just AWS solutions, knows that, you're going to need to be taking some inputs from the user to determine how the deployment goes, or, certain features, whether to turn them on and off, stuff like that. So for this solution, what we're going to be kind of trying to collect information on is around, how the customer wants the API to function. So unveiling that part, we're going to be mostly dealing with just cross-origin resource sharing, because that's a big deal when it comes to having a API out there. So we're going to ask the customer, do you want to have this enabled, true or false? Depending on their use case, they'll pick that. And then if they selected true for the second parameter, we'll ask them to specify an origin for the API to whitelist in the header. And they can also specify the wildcard, which will let it kind of loose into the wild, so anybody can use it. And so that shores up our parameters, and we have our inputs. Now we're ready to start actually building in those patterns and constructs that we talked about. So now that we're building, we're in the blue. So first thing we're going to do is set up our Lambda function. That's a key component of this solution. It's going to be doing all the editing of the images. We want to specify the runtime here, where the source code for that Lambda function is going to sit, as well as some environment variables. So you can see here that we tie back those parameter values to the environment variables here. And then Lambda function will hold on to those and call them as they need, and determine the behavior in terms of, returning the image and the headers to set. So we've got that set up. We'll add a little bit of magic to the API, nothing too crazy, but we want to specify binary media types here to make sure that the API doesn't get confused in terms of the content that it's serving back. We're going to be serving back images as binary files, so we need to specify that. And then really where we start to take off is we're going to implement that first pattern, which is going to be the CloudFront to API gateway to Lambda pattern. And as you can see here, it takes about 4 or 5 lines of code. All we have to do is go ahead and declare it in our TypeScript file and say, we want to deploy the Lambda function, pass in those Lambda function properties, and then pass in the API property that we put in a couple lines above. And the second pattern is going to be that Lambda to S3. And the interesting thing to note here, right, is so we have these two patterns, both kind of with joining points on that Lambda function. So what we allow our customers to do is switch on and off kind of those end caps of the pattern, depending on the pattern itself. But in this case, we're able to turn off the Lambda function from deploying from the second pattern and pull in the Lambda function from the first pattern, so that we can tie those together and have it work in harmony. And then last thing, we'll just add some bucket permissions to that pattern. And then the finishing touches will be tying together the source buckets that the Lambda is going to be looking for in its whitelist to grab images from. So as you can see here, 53 lines of TypeScript, very readable. It's a great way to define infrastructure, and it shows that nice harmony between solution constructs as well as CDK logic as well. So everything works together really nicely there. So moving right along.
Absolutely love it. If you can just go back to the previous slide for one moment.
Yep, sure thing.
I just want to gush over how beautiful this looks, because I mean, there's a time and place. We like to say right tool for the job, but I think one of the things that really impresses me about the CDK is the fact that there's just some things that as much as we might like declarative programming styles, sometimes there's nothing that can really quite replace the clarity of doing it imperatively. And not only that, I mean, one thing I want to point out here, and we didn't use this here, but this imperative style is also much more conducive to conditional branching. right? So you can imagine like when you take a parameter input, like whether CORS is enabled, that maybe you have a slightly different infrastructure. And we can do that here, and we can continue to reassemble these building blocks that you've been demonstrating.
Yeah, definitely. I know for one of my personal favorite things about this kind of shift over to the programmatic, defining infrastructure this way is that, as somebody who worked very in depth with CloudFormation and some of those other kind of like, I don't want to say markdown, driven languages, but, they're set up like that using JSON as an example. Even just, as somebody trying to onboard as a new developer, it's very kind of overwhelming to read through and get a good grasp on where the information's going throughout the solution. You can be having those ref tags and everything all over the place. So this is just really nice way of cleaning everything up and making it readable kind of to the masses. And that's another great point too. I mean, it makes it from what we've kind of seen is it makes it very approachable from an open sourcing perspective as well. So great, example here is if you build a solution, it kind of inherently is extensible, right? So you could, use that as part of a bigger solution because it's kind of all just levels of abstraction. So you could kind of open source what you build, and it's very approachable to the open source community, and just really nice overall.
Yeah, and just to riff on that, I mean, that's kind of the other advantage of having really concise infrastructure as code is that, you probably all heard the term, code is written to be read and incidentally to be executed. And I think we really have to take into consideration when this is how we define production infrastructure. This is itself a living document designed to be read, right? And the more clearly it communicates the underlying intent, the better off we all are. Because let's say you wrote one of these and I'm reviewing it. If the intention of the review is for me to catch errors, like, hey, is this thing actually correctly configured? Does this have minimally scoped permissions? It's much easier for me to do that in a concise way, rather than kind of what you were referring to, which is if I have if this is going to, I hope we're going to get a chance to look at the resulting CloudFormation doc, and we can let the viewer decide for themselves which one would you rather review, right? So I think that's another interesting element to what this enables.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I think that it's an underrated sort of optimization, right? Like I know we all talk about readability but like trying to understand something like intent here is extremely important. I mean, also if your architecture is going to evolve over time, you don't want to go into that 1,000-line sheet of CloudFormation and make all your edits directly in line there. Like that's going to be a nightmare. Now, some people may have preference or may be very familiar with that, but I think that like if we're talking about pure efficiency here, the ability to simply change a few lines or add just a few lines to an existing, here we have a TypeScript file or script essentially that's just going to run, and we can add or modify those at a single line, and that will do all the downstream changes when it synthesizes the resulting CloudFormation code. So exciting stuff.
Yeah, I think that the other great point. So we touched on prescriptive defaults. Kind of with any level of abstraction, you're going to have a little bit of stuff kind of sitting under the hood. And I think that the workflow here, Robert, you mentioned doing like code reviews and stuff like that. I think that the way that it's set up is, even if you had to override a best practice property or something like that, you're going to see it in the TypeScript file. So, I mean, everything's spelled out here, and it's, it's all right in front of you. So, yeah, I mean, I think that's another great kind of add-on benefit for a lot of development teams there, is they can see in plain sight what's being overridden in terms of the prescriptive guidance that we're delivering, and just have all the cards on the table right there.
So we've got one question from a very patient viewer in Twitch chat. Werner G is wondering, are there any plans to integrate this or offer implementations with something like Terraform? I understand that CDK built on top of CloudFormation, and above the CDK now we have solutions constructs. So is there, to your understanding, any sort of plans to implement lower level primitives that something like a solutions construct would work with or integrate with?
I mean, that's a great question. And I think that, like, we love to hear kind of the customer feedback around what they're looking for. So I think that, like you said, we are pretty tied in with the CDK. But depending on what our options are kind of moving forward, that, we're always happy to develop things that help the customer, reduce the amount of code that they're working with and all that good stuff. So, yeah, I mean, I think in terms of short-term roadmap, that's not immediately on there, but I think that that would be something cool to kind of see down the road, longer term, definitely.
Awesome.
So we'll go ahead and finish this build out. If there's no other questions, Nick, do you have anything else there, or?
No, green light. Yeah, keep going.
Awesome. Okay, so we have all of this beautiful infrastructure here. Now what we're going to do is, so we talked about setting up that Lambda function. We need to actually provide the source code for that. And you can see here kind of on line 27, we specify where that's going to be sitting in respect to our project. So, oops, get my mouse set up here. So all we have to do is drag and drop that source code folder into where the Lambda function is expecting to find it. And then the CDK takes care of packaging that all up when it comes time to deploy. Granted, if you are building a solution from scratch, you'll have to actually build the code in there or build it separately and then merge it in. But really easy to reference between the, where the source code is sitting and tying it up with the Lambda function that's going to be consuming it.
Yeah. It occurs to me that we can, with this kind of recipe, we can have, we've talked a long time about how there's usually these impedance mismatches where you have to write the front end in JavaScript and the back end is in Perl or PHP or what have you. I mean, with the rise of Node.js, we've seen a lot more JavaScript backends, but now we have the trifecta. We have the front end, back end, and infrastructure all in a single language, right? And not necessarily JavaScript. You can do this with C#, and then I understand C# support is coming to the CDK contracts eventually as well. But that's just really cool.
Yeah, we love having it. Like I said, everything in the same IDE. Just, it's so much nicer that way. Quick question for Nick and Robert. Can you see the face tiles on the side of the screen there? Should I minimize that, or just want to make sure you can see the whole slide?
Oh no, you're good. You're good. Everything's looks good on our end. Yeah.
Cool. All right. Yeah. So that brings us to the fourth and final step of our solutions development journey, which is you have two options, right? So our solution's ready for testing or deployment, depending on what stage you're in. We can either run CDK deploy or CDK synth on it to kind of take it further. CDK deploy will deploy that stack that you just created into your account using CloudFormation. You don't really see it too much, but it's basically just pushing a CloudFormation stack or a change set if you already have something up there into your account, and it's provisioning those resources for you. And then on the flip side, we have CDK synth, which will do the local CloudFormation packaging for you. It'll bundle up your template, and it'll also bundle up any source code associated with it, so that you have a nice distributable kind of set of artifacts to either pass on to other people or kind of productize even. So that's really the final step there. And then moving ahead. So Nick, I know you wanted to see the ending JSON template. I really tried. I couldn't squeeze it into the slide in a way that would be attractive enough for presentation use, but I did count the line numbers. So like I said, we have 53 lines of AWS solutions constructs and CDK code working in Harmony in TypeScript. That translates, using kind of a similar approach with, just defining everything as CDK constructs. It's about 215 lines, depending on how you choose to do that, all the setup and everything. And then that also brings us up to 1038. I think that's the number there. 1038 lines of JSON. So as you can see, the difference between the JSON and the CDK is massive. But then when you bring in the solutions constructs, it takes us just that extra mile where we can really, keep whittling down and making our code a lot more manageable from the kind of original JSON and YAML formats that we're used to seeing.
Yeah, that's
Yeah, after seeing numbers like these, it's no wonder why there's so much interest and support for the CDK. And I think the fact that the solution construct just furthers that trend is the right path for sure.
Yeah,
yeah.
definitely.
I'm gonna reference Richard Boyd, who was on our show presenting Code Artifact a few weeks back. But he had a tweet the other day where he said something along the lines of he had created this new solution and it had a similar value proposition that it reduced the work from this big amount to this smaller amount. And the first question he got when someone saw it was like, well, why isn't it one? Why isn't it only one step? Why is it not only one line of code? And it's like, hey, I'll take those questions every day, right? Like we'll grapple with the hard problems of how we can try and make that possible. But in the meantime, I think it is nice to look back and see what was yesterday and what is possible today, with solutions constructs. So some very exciting numbers there. I was a math major in college. I see numbers, I see graphs. You're barking up the right tree.
Excellent. Yeah, that. Like I said, that's what I personally love about working with the frameworks, and it's really nice to have everything clear, concise, readable for everyone involved. So huge benefit there.
But on the flip side, this is not so good for you if you work at a company that measures your output by lines of code.
Yeah. Now we need to figure out some new metrics, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you'll have that. It's all a zero sum game or whatever they call it.
Actually, you know what? I take that back. You know what you can do? You can just run CDK synth and check in the CloudFormation template and get the credit for just writing far fewer lines of code.
There you go, Rob. That's malicious compliance at its best.
Oh no, come on! I don't know malicious compliance. Who knows you're running it?
Value driven.
Yes.
Work smarter, not harder is the mantra. But, yeah, just wrapping up here. So the key takeaways really, we explored all of these really well. But for the customer, really of any kind of, if you're, super technical and you love your infrastructure versus if you're someone just kind of spinning up and kind of entering the world and doing smaller scale projects, super low barriers to entry. We talked about faster development, easy maintenance, onboarding comes with that. If you're starting up a new team or bringing on new resources, very easy to get them up to speed with the stuff you've been working on. Reusable code, you can extend the solutions that you write infinitely, use them as part of kind of bigger pieces to bigger puzzles, if you will. And then the testing is one thing that I just love so much about working with these frameworks is, CloudFormation and kind of those lower level products don't really give you a lot of opportunity to do automated testing on the resources that you're provisioning or kind of what to expect out of a stack. You can really start to bake that in with the CDK. We love to kind of have that extra level of assurance as we're developing applications and infrastructure. It's really nice to have an extra little checkboxes we're running through the pipeline there. Super easy to create well-architected applications. Like we mentioned, everything comes with AWS best practice defaults, which you can of course override if they get in your way. And then frictionless ramp up. So, I mean, everything in the same IDE, no new languages or anything to learn, and write everything. And as you mentioned, Robert, the trifecta there of JavaScript, if you're a Node.js developer, have everything in one language. So
music to my ears.
Yep. Definitely. I think that's all I got demo wise for everyone today. Yeah, like I said, we just released out on Monday with the GA version. So we've got our GitHub up there. We love everyone to we encourage everyone in the community to go up there, take everything apart. If you see anything, PRs, issues, we're always on there. So yeah, definitely super excited to hear feedback from the community and customers to make this a great product. Keep iterating on it.
Yeah, and Ryan, I know it should kind of go without saying, given that the GitHub link is right there. We've mentioned it's open source. We've showed it off, but some people were asking earlier in the stream, how much does this cost? Like, I like the efficiency here, but what's it going to cost me? And I know I joked the other day, but it sounds like it's the nice low cost of free 99, right? It's absolutely free. You go into GitHub, you clone it yourself, and go to town, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly. I love that saying too. Yeah, it's similar to the CDK. It's totally free to pull down, play with. You only pay for the services that you provision once you spin that up into the cloud. So that's the pricing model there, if you will.
Awesome. Well, usually we end on how you get started, but you so graciously did that for us. We've had lots of questions along the way. We've got them answered. Someone was wondering what your IDE was before. I'm pretty sure it was Visual Studio Code, right?
Yep, Visual Studio.
Cool. And one last statement. We were joking before about lines of code as a performance metric. Werner putting it very eloquently. It's all about time to value, right? That should be the important metric, whether you're delivering software or beyond. Making that more effective, I think, is something that would be a continuity across all AWS services. Reduce the time to value. So. Awesome. Well, Ryan, I know third up on the day today, but you were a trooper and you stuck in there, and the demo is awesome. I'm excited to start using solutions constructs. So you may have covered this before, but how many are available currently?
We have about 25 out there right now, getting started. So like I said, the goal was to keep kind of building that out, using kind of what we're seeing internally as commonly used interactions. We have a good kind of gauge of that, as well as whatever the customers are saying in terms of a lot of people say we need a certain kind of grouping of constructs. We'll be more than happy to either build it or work together to achieve that. So yeah, we're really excited about it, and love to hear the feedback on it.
Awesome. Yeah, so to get started,
an idea occurs to me. We usually do that silly segment at the end where we try to combine all of the service announcements and the demos into one thing. Since Ryan's been such an awesome sport and has gone last here, Ryan, if you're game for this, you want to join us for this silly little exercise at the end of every episode?
Sure, let's do it.
Okay, Nick, you want to set it up?
All right, yeah. Ryan, while I'm setting up the rules, just stop sharing your screen and I'll switch the overlay over. But yeah, so the rules of engagement here are simple. Every episode, we go and we look at each of the 3 launches we've had, or the number of launches, because sometimes it's not 3, and we try to think of the the customer whose dream episode this would be. Like, oh, I'm going to go build an application that uses A and B and C, and you have to come up with some way to string them together. So it's a little bit of an interesting game, but let's just recap again for everyone who's tuning back in now, and it's been a long episode. So we had Honeycode. So a no-code solution to building applications from end to end with permissioning and nice and simple no-code solution tool. Second, we had new media analysis features for recognition video. So things like black bar detection, figuring out where we want to inject ads, stuff like that. And then here we have solutions constructs. So Rob, I don't know how you want to do this. Maybe I feel bad making Ryan go first unless he wants to do something with solutions constructs.
Yeah.
That would just be cruel.
You don't even have to go first. I think it was just we don't want to put you on the spot here. It is, but if you want to think of it, the approach is kind of like, what if these were the secret ingredients and you're the Iron Chef?
Yeah. So are we talking about target audience here, or what's the?
We're saying you're building a startup and you got to use all 3 of these, or just
right.
a pet project or something like that. And I've got a burning one. So if you wanted some time to think about it, I can go first.
I think I've got a. Let me just.
Yeah. Hit us with it.
All right. So, here we go. Since the recognition this is going to be a very media driven go, but I think since this is a common platform these days, all the cool kids are using it. TikTok success self-service consulting type of optimization, I think, is a good one. You can use your Honeycode to build up a little kind of tracking app, and then use your recognition to tear apart your videos, and then I think it was mentioned earlier, actually packaging some of the recognition stuff and the media stuff into a CloudFormation template, so we can take it full circle on the infrastructure side with solutions constructs.
You just stole The wind right on my sails. Yeah, I mean that's awesome, right? I mean, I think the connection between the media interface engine, was it? I'm misremembering the acronym.
Yeah, that sounds
MIE.
right.
MIE, yeah.
The MIE, right? Because that's basically a giant cloud. I mean, I don't want to undersell it, but part of it certainly is a cloud formation template that shows how you can combine all the different AI services to produce this kind of end-to-end media analysis and editing tool. And one of the natural opportunities there, it seems to me, is to take solutions constructs and turn that into something much more concise, something much easier to hack and to review and that sort of thing. So there's a natural alignment there between the media tools that we talked about today with recognition, segmentation, and solutions constructs. Now, with respect to Honeycode, now we have to pop up a layer and talk about the application, because Honeycode is kind of out there, right? It is not tightly integrated with all these different AWS services yet. But so if the artifact of that is, some sort of video production pipeline, we can share that with the team through Honeycode, and not everybody has to be technically savvy enough to build one of these applications, but they can all see, hey, we have to edit 20 videos by 2,000 videos by the end of the month. How are we going to do this? What's the status of each one, right?
Yeah, or like idea management, they're all purpose-driven videos. So, I could see the use case for it. It does make it difficult because it's outside of the cloud formation realm. So but I think we could make it happen.
Yeah, I think another approach I was going to take over on the combination of MIE and solutions constructs was, we mentioned a lot about how there are folks that are forking the MIE and then writing their own features for their business use cases. And so something that appears to me is like, well, if the solution construct is going to eventually compile down into, CloudFormation template code, you can create those snippets and essentially, even if you don't port the entire MIE into solutions constructs and CDK, you could use that to rapidly prototype new features that will then interface with what is the CloudFormation based MIE. So a little bit about best of both worlds.
Yeah.
Love it.
Well, thanks for being a good sport, Ryan. I know we put you on the spot there, and you nailed it. You came up with an awesome idea.
Definitely.
No,
occasion.
Nick and Rob, I can't thank you enough for the time today. And for everyone out there watching, definitely check out the GitHub, and love to see your contributions, ideas, feedback. Keep iterating on it.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Ryan. This is going to do it for us on episode 6. Is it 6, Rob? Yeah.
Yep.
Episode 6 of AWS What's Next. Again, covered 3 really exciting launches. Just did the fun little ending segment there where we string them all together. But again, Honeycode, video media analysis features for recognition video, and solutions constructs here. So 3 very different types of launches. Again, we're very excited by them, and we're very thankful for the service team members that tuned in, or rather joined us on the stream to show those off and show off those demos. Again, many of these first looks in demo form, often accompanying blog posts and some other promotional videos. But wanted to give another big shout out to everyone in the audience who's tuning in from both LinkedIn and on Twitch.tv. Thank you again for getting your questions in. We appreciate it immensely. We've been throwing links all throughout the way in chat, so if you're interested in any of those resources, feel free to check those out. But otherwise, we have all eyes ahead on episode 7, which should be in a few weeks. We're toying around with some other ideas right now. We may be coming out with some content before the other 3-week cadence. But just follow along on social media. We'll have those handles. They're both on screen now, but we'll also be there on the end credits screen. So follow along and don't miss any announcements, and we'll be getting all that information to you as it develops. All right, well, my voice is just about shot. I've got to go drink a bunch of water. Got some other things to do. Otherwise, happy Friday, everybody. Thank you again for tuning in to episode 6 of AWS What's Next. Thank you for making the show so great, and we will see you again back for episode 7. Take it easy and have a great weekend, everyone.
All right. See you, everyone.